Good afternoon, everyone. We are here for a roundtable about navigating tomorrow, a strategic foresight for sustainable success as part of the 8th edition of Knowledge Summit organized by Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation and United Nations. This is the fourth session of the third day virtual extension, and the final session will be followed at 6 o'clock UAE time. This session will last for 1 hour. We're going to start with the subjects that the panelists would like to bring to the table, followed by a discussion and a Q&A session. So I'd like to invite you to submit your questions in the chat. And this session is streamed with a simultaneous interpretation in Arabic language. And I'm happy to be here with Robert Willock, Regional Manager and Director MENA from the Economist Intelligence Corporate Network, Jack Orlick, Policy Analyst at OECD, and Thomas Hammergarn, Head of Unit in the European Union Policy Lab, Foresight Design for Policy Behavioral Insights. And he's also Deputy Director Innovation in Science and Policymaking. And myself, Jacqueline Vasconcelos. I'm Microsoft Program Manager of Environmental Startup Accelerator in Paris and co-founder of two NGOs, one Speculative Futures Paris and Bonjour Donut. So I'd like to leave the stage to the panelists, and let's start with Robert. Robert, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and good afternoon, everybody. Wonderful to be with you today, and thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen in a second and just take you through one interpretation of sustainable success. So if you just bear with me, I will find my screen and share that with you. Jacqueline, perhaps you can give me a thumbs up if that has come through. Excellent. Okay, good to know. Well, I thought for today's session, I would give some thoughts to how we can evaluate the sustainable success of cities and countries. Now, of course, this can be quite a subjective thing, and it will depend entirely on your definition of sustainable success and your ideas about priorities and areas of importance. We, I know, at the Economist Group are often accused of being obsessed with metrics like gross domestic product or GDP per head. And of course, that risks overlooking some other important indicators such as health and happiness, for example. Now, it's no coincidence that United Arab Emirates, which is where I live and work, recently appointed a Minister of State for Happiness and launched a national programme for happiness and well-being. Now, at the Economist Group, we have a number of different measures for country and city success, three of which I will share with you. So the first of those is resilience. So we look at resilience from the perspective of things like safety and security and preparedness. As Ronald Reagan famously once said, a government's first duty is to protect its people, not run their lives. So resilience would be my first measure of sustainable success. Second, we look quite often at livability. We look at the attractiveness of countries and cities, and we look at how aspirational they are. Do people want to live and work there? And then the third thing I thought I would look at with you today is the business environment. Are these places investable? Is it a good place to be from a business perspective? Can money flow in and out? Can you win the confidence of the business community and therefore employers and provide employment to your citizens? Now, we measure and rank cities and countries on these criteria and many more using indices, which are consistent methodological benchmarks based on scores on a range of relevant factors. So let me take you through some of those, and I'll start with resilience. Our Resilient Cities Index, that's an Economist Impact global benchmark of urban risk, response, and recovery. And thanks to urbanization, by 2050, cities will be home to more than 2/3 of the world's population, placing cities right at the crux of humanity's ability to adapt to the risks and uncertainties of the 21st century. And we're certainly seeing a lot of risks and uncertainties around at the moment. natural disasters from extreme weather to pandemics and human catastrophes such as industrial accidents, war, terrorism, cyber attacks. These take their toll, their gravest toll, on citizens in densely populated urban areas. Cities can be flashpoints for instability and conflict due to poverty and inequality. But cities that use data and technology to create operational efficiencies and share information with their citizens, what we might call smart cities, are better at dealing with shocks. And their efforts to achieve environmental resilience are typically led by innovative solutions, especially around energy, infrastructure, both physical and technological, and healthcare. So for the Resilient Cities Index, we score cities on 4 areas: critical infrastructure, environment, socio-institutional, and economic. Now, the top scoring city, I've given you a clue with the skyline here, was New York. But there are different cities leading each of the different areas. The high-income Gulf and Asian cities were top performers in the critical infrastructure pillar, with places like Dubai, Shanghai, and Singapore taking 3 of the top 4 slots. And this reflects several advantages, including the ability of capital-rich emerging economies to develop greenfield infrastructure, unlike old European cities which are hobbled by decades or centuries-old infrastructure. It also, I guess, in the case of places like Dubai and Singapore, reflects the benefits of a smaller geographic footprint. Compare that to the populous emerging economies of places like Lagos, Dhaka, and Jakarta, which face the most significant challenges as they seek to deliver critical infrastructure for huge metropolitan populations across sprawling geographies. And in some cases, efforts are further complicated by poor governance. Cities with high levels of corruption scored poorly on most aspects of critical infrastructure. Going deeper into the subcategories of infrastructure, for things like urban mobility, Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Hong Kong scored best. But interestingly, only 6 cities have emergency services that can consistently respond in under 10 minutes: Dubai, Istanbul, London, LA, Munich, and Tokyo. So that's resilience, and I've got plenty more to say on that. There are lots of things to discuss around social cohesion, for example, and efforts need greater advancement across the board in all cities there. And that is a process that definitely needs to be led by city leadership and with the engagement of civil society. So there's resilience. Let me now move on to livability in the short time that I have there. And there are a range of factors that make a city more or less livable, such as incidents of civil unrest, the availability of good healthcare services, or the quality of education. In the Economist Intelligence Unit's Livability Index, we assess how well or how poorly a city fares across 5 broad categories: stability, healthcare, culture and environment, education, and infrastructure to determine its livability score. Now, you can use lots of indices, but ultimately people, when it comes to livability, tend to vote with their feet where possible, and with their wallets and with their investment. And you will literally see it in population flows. I'm here in Dubai, and there's a joke in Dubai, which is the best city in India? Dubai. It's all about how aspirational a city is and how much people want to live there and work there. So which city tops our livability ranking for 2023? And again, the clue is on the screen. I wonder if you recognize the city skyline of Vienna in Austria, which came out ahead of Copenhagen in Denmark and Melbourne in Australia. And that's because of Vienna's winning combination of stability, good culture and entertainment, reliable infrastructure, and exemplary education and health services. Now, Vienna has occupied this top spot regularly over the past few years, with only the COVID-19 pandemic causing it to vacate its space at the top spot last time round. If you were wondering, Damascus in Syria and Tripoli in Libya are still at the bottom of the list, held back by social unrest, terrorism, and conflict. In fact, the Middle East and Africa as a region has the lowest average livability scores. However, cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi buck that trend somewhat. They are still penalized in our index for their hot summers, their relatively poor air quality, and levels of censorship and some social restrictions, although many of these things are starting to ease. Now, it's good for public policy leaders to be able to compare their city's performance with others, and a radar type graph is a good way of doing this. This one's a little complicated. I've probably overloaded it with lots of different cities there. But here you can see Vienna plotted alongside Paris. They included Paris because we have a few panelists with us joining us from France today. And I've also included Singapore and cities in the Middle East. So you can compare, and policymakers compare, where their livability scores are good and where they are bad relative to places which they would consider to be competitive. Finally, and I don't want to hog too much time because I know my other panelists have plenty to share, I'll look at the business environment. This is an important consideration for investment decisions, and our business environment index measures a city, actually measures countries and therefore its major cities based on 11 measures, including things like economic stability, market opportunities, tech readiness, private enterprise policy, labour market, foreign trade and exchange, and tax policies. All these are things that you would consider if you were looking for somewhere to open an office or a factory, for example. Is it easy for you to do business there? Will we face unfair competition or corruption? Will we be able to get our money in and out? Are there going to be problems employing people? And again, in terms of who wins, in terms of the business environment index, again, the clue is on the screen. Singapore tops our business environment index ahead of Canada and Denmark. These cities, these countries are typically established business centres or business hubs that have worked hard to build a positive reputation. Now, these environments can change quite quickly. We've lately seen rapid improvements in places in Southeast Asia. Vietnam and Thailand are moving rapidly up the league table, and India, where a renewed focus on the manufacturing sector is starting to complement its service sector strength. There's been a recent downgrade for China, partly due to tensions with the US, but also partly due to some of its structural challenges, the 3Ds, demographics, debt, and deflation. And then we come to the UAE, where I am. The UAE works very hard at making itself investable, and its successes are somewhat jealously eyed by Saudi Arabia, which wants more in-country value from businesses operating in the kingdom. So here's another good opportunity to make some comparisons, another radar map. So policymakers can see again where the gaps are. The UAE famously and rightly looks towards Singapore, and now it looks over its shoulder at Saudi Arabia. But Saudi has quite a long way to catch up. The UAE ranks 15th in our business environment index, ahead of the UK, ahead of France, ahead of Japan, ahead of Taiwan. Saudi's peers, Saudi's in 41st place around the likes of Portugal, Romania, and Italy. Not bad company, but still with room for improvement. So I've included Kuwait there as another GCC country that has significant ambitions. So there are three ways of measuring sustainable success. I hope I haven't used up too much time, and I'm going to hand back to Jacqueline there. Three ways of evaluating the sustainable success of countries and cities. And now I hand back.
Yes, thank you very much, Robert. Jack, stage is yours now.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Robert. I'll try and hopefully touch on some of the things that you said just now. And Jacqueline, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Fantastic. Bonjour from Paris, which at the moment, at least for me, is not the city of light. So apologies that I look slightly like I'm in witness protection here. I'm going to talk to you about some of the work that my team does at the OECD. I'm part of a division called Indigo, which stands for Innovative, Digital and Open Governance. And what we do is work with governments around the world, mostly at national level, but also at city level, to try and improve the way that the internals of government work and the way that they engage with citizens. So this work is often done in very close cooperation with country partners and city partners, where we undertake projects with them to try and experiment with new ways using innovative techniques that draw on digital technologies and approaches from human-centered design to try and reimagine how governments can function. And the area that I really focus on is to do with anticipation, and an area that we call anticipatory innovation governance. And what we do in anticipatory innovation governance is try to work with policymakers and occasionally politicians to help them to anticipate, navigate, and shape change. And we have a number of publications that I would invite you to look up on the OECD website, from work that we've done with Ireland, Finland, Slovenia. We've got ongoing work with Malta, Italy, Lithuania, and a number of other countries. And what we're trying to do with them is not only to introduce them to the approaches of strategic foresight, such as horizon scanning, scenario planning, and road mapping, which can help them to anticipate the future and shape change, as I mentioned, but to ensure that the systems are in place to connect the knowledge that these processes generate to policy action. Often what happens is a group will produce some very helpful scenarios which sketch out a range of possible futures for a city or a nation, but then they're kind of put into a drawer, and all of the work that's gone on to produce that is sort of lost. And we call that the impact gap, the space between foresight practice and policy action. And that's what we try and help them to overcome. And I'm just going to give you some examples of the ways that we think that governments can try to overcome this. And to start with, I just want to focus on Singapore as an example of a city that has really invested in strategic foresight, creating the Center for Strategic Futures in 2009, which moved into the Prime Minister's office in 2015. And it's a really core unit which helps to provide strategic guidance and advice to the government, and also to train civil servants throughout Singapore in the techniques of strategic foresight, helping them to consider the future in a more holistic way when making decisions in their policy areas. And strategic foresight in cities is particularly valuable. And as Robert said, cities are often subject to factors beyond their control. There can be shocks that really shake cities to their core. So cities need to be resilient and nimble to anticipate what those are and adapt to them quickly. They're highly complex and dense. So ensuring that networks and systems are in place to enable rapid response to changes is also important. And of course, they're drivers for innovation. So thinking about the future and thinking about what the future may hold can help cities to act in ways that help them to make the most of future opportunities and address future challenges. And some ways that this can be done include involving people in setting a vision for a future and anticipating the changes that might either contribute to achieving that vision, in which case they are opportunities that can be grasped and drawn upon, or which may disrupt the process to that vision. And we did some work with the smart cities ecosystem in Latvia to bring together a wide range of stakeholders to try and anticipate future changes that might cause their vision for smart cities to be shaken, and those which could accelerate the shift to smarter cities. And some of the examples of trends that they identified were working from home, which obviously changes the way that people might need to move around the city, potential migration to the Baltics, to Latvia, driven by climate change, people wishing to move to the north, challenges in EV charging. And this work was conducted before the current conflict in Ukraine. And there were some indications that Latvia felt that there was a need to prepare for that, even at that point. Another way that cities can start to consider the future and how it might need to adapt involve using data. Robert touched on this earlier. And I'm drawing here from some work that I did at my previous workplace, Nesta, in the UK, where we looked at online job advertisements, the Crunchbase database of new startups, and other sources of information to try and anticipate the skills changes that might affect the UK at a national and a city level in the future. And by doing this, cities can start to try to predict what sort of skills might be needed to drive innovation and how those in roles that might be subject to kind of massive change as a result of automation and robotics could be supported to move into roles that are growing in the future. Lastly, in this presentation, I wanted to draw your attention to the importance of systems for anticipation. So you can bring people together and get them to think about the future and what it might hold together. You can draw on novel sources of data to try and sketch out what the future might hold and use it to continually update your assumptions on that. But what's really vital is to create these agile structures to gather information about the future, to make sense of it, and to use it to initiate action. And I've drawn here from a colleague's slide that we've sort of jokingly called the millefeuille of anticipatory governance for existential risks. A millefeuille is a many-layered pastry that many people in France enjoy. And we use this to try to bring to life a little bit the complexity of the structures that are required, not only to generate knowledge about the future, but to act on it. So you can collect the data, but it needs to be made sense of by people who understand it and who can give it legitimacy. You need to ensure political engagement so that it can be acted upon. And you need collaboration and engagement of a range of stakeholders so that in the case here of kind of large-scale risks, they can quickly jump into action and address them together. So I just wanted to leave you here with a quick question, which is, how can cities leverage all of this collective intelligence and new technology to anticipate and prepare for change? And I hope that our discussion can move on to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Very interesting, your millefeuille systems make sense. Mr. Thomas, please, the stage is yours now.
Thanks a lot, Jacqueline. Thanks, Robert. Jack. I'm joining you from Brussels today. Very happy to be here. While I share my screen, I can build actually, I think, quite a bit on what was already said, because what we are doing here in the Commission on Strategic Foresight is very much related to what was said already. But let me give you the EU perspective. Now, a lot of what we do is also relevant for cities, but I will not dwell in this first bit, dwell too much into the role of cities, but rather generally say a few words about strategic foresight in the EU. I think Jack did a very good job in explaining why foresight is necessary, and I just want to make sure that we have a common understanding of what foresight is. It is not forecasting, and is also not predicting. It is thinking about plausible futures and what these futures would mean for today's policies to make us future-proof and to be able to wind tunnel our policies. Now, in the EU and in the Commission, we have created a vice president for foresight, now an executive vice president, in fact, Maros Šefčovič, who is leading this politically. So we have a political mandate behind the foresight work, which also translates into how it is embedded into our organization. But also we work with our member states, so the union's member states in a foresight network, and we try to bring, very much in line with what Jack said, the collective intelligence we have here together in these processes. So before I dive into the sustainability topic, let me just say what we do. Again, one topic we're focusing on in our foresight work is sustainability transitions. So that is the question of not only how can we be successful with sustainability, but how do we move from where we are today to a better state of the world in terms of sustainability, here very much seen as also biological, environmental sustainability, but also social and economic sustainability. And I will come to that in a second. We do have a second work strand here on emerging risks, not as existential risks biased, I think, as Jack, but more what do we see coming. We use horizon scanning for this. We do have our own horizon scanning processes in the European institutions. And the last thing we do is technology foresight, where we have published a couple of papers where we look at what type of technologies are coming for us. And remember, we are, as the Commission, we are making legislative proposals to the Union. So for us, of course, this work is also informing our legislative processes, including thinking about future challenges. Now, this is another overwhelming slide, but I want to just focus on 3 elements here, just to link back to what was said already. So we, in the context of this political mandate on foresight, we have published in recent years 4 strategic foresight reports annually. The first one was on resilience, something Robert dwelled on, and has created a resilience dashboard where we observe the resilience of member states very much along the lines of what Robert laid out. We had other reports on open strategic autonomy, and the last 2, I will just give you a glimpse of them, were on sustainability. So this year's report was on sustainability transition, and specifically the economic and social dimension, but also what does it mean in this new world order which we are living in, or the non-order, the multipolar order, whatever you want to call it. Let me just put out 3 things here from all these points. You see on the bottom left the shifting policy and economic indicators towards sustainable and inclusive well-being. That's very much in line with what Robert said about beyond GDP. What is it we need to look at for sustainability success beyond our metrics, which are driven by economic metrics, which obviously are very important for economic success, but there might be other elements we need to look at. The second I would like to stress is stronger democracy and more generational fairness. Sustainability is, of course, about keeping resources available also for future generations. So intergenerational fairness and stronger democracy plays in there. Stronger democracy because of the fact that if you want to engage in sustainability transition, you need to have buy-in, and you need also the participation of citizens in this. Because the challenges and the social dimension of this is so big that sort of a centralist approach, I think, will be very difficult to do. There is also a regional element in this because there is a multi-level governance issue in these kind of sustainability transitions, because it's not that the EU or one member state at the central level can do this. There needs to be a clear understanding of what is it the different levels of government, from cities, regional, what is their role in these processes of transition. The last thing I wanted to bring, I think this is important for the EU, but for many countries who are in transition into more sustainable ways of working and living, is skills. How does our labor market participation work? What is the future of skills when we look at the developments in the AI field, look at new technologies? What is it we need to actually make sense, also in light of the demographic development? So I stop here. The rest I will not delve into. And just 2 points from our last year's report, because I thought this was also interesting for you. There we looked, it was a different foresight exercise, because in this year's report, we used scenarios very much in line with what Jack described. Here we actually were more mapping technologies and mapping them to their contribution to the green transition. So to what extent can we marry green and digital technologies to help us with the transition? Now, we looked at 5 strategic sectors. Why these 5? Well, these are the most CO2 emission prone sectors we have in our economy. So we looked at these, and let me again just pick 2. Enabling greener transport with digital technologies was one area we're looking in. Very much how can we use smart grids, digital twins, other means to improve our mobility and city design towards mobility. And then greening buildings with digitalization. What about circularity? How do we measure impact also digitally? And what can we do, again, with virtualization to reduce space needs, for example? So just to give you 2 what I thought were maybe more city-related topics. Here, what we tried to do here was to look at key requirements. And again, it's a lot of information on the slide, but let me just go to one. Again, also in last year's report, and that's a common theme also in this year's report, is ensuring just transitions is incredibly important. If people feel left behind And if developments, be it in transport, but also be it in the availability of specific technologies which are supposed to help us with sustainability, is not ensured for the population and for our citizens, it will be very difficult to move on anything really because of the buy-in which is lacking. Now, there is also, of course, in Europe, we have a very strong regulation on privacy and ethical use of technology. We have the discussion ongoing on the AI field. We have the General Data Protection Directive. So there is a bit of regulation. So there is a bit of legislation there already, and which has impacted also a lot of the discussions in the world on these topics. And I just want, again, also here we stressed the need for enabling markets and ensure the diversity of market players and also the relevant skills. So this is a bit the type of work we did. And I'd stop here. And I hope I didn't take too much time because I obviously happy to engage in discussion now. But I thought to conclude, foresight for us is really trying to inform our policy choices when we design them. And that's, I think, our way of trying to be successful in sustainability and bringing this method to the policy process.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas. So let's start with some questions to put that together. So if we ask with regards to livability and the business environment, attractiveness, what that represents in terms of economics and economic opportunities. If you, Robert or Thomas, would like to take that.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Yeah, look, I mean, there's a clear correlation between certainly conducive business environments and economic success. If you look at the league table of those countries with the best business environments on those entire range of measures, then they tend to be the ones that attract the highest levels of foreign direct investment flow. They tend to be the ones that attract the highest level of interest from multinational companies to base themselves there, to establish regional headquarters there. And of course, livability to some extent goes hand in hand with that. If I'm looking to establish a regional office in a city, then I want to be able to attract talent to that office as well. And the way that I attract talent to that office is by basing it somewhere where talented, mobile people are happy to live and work. So, a conducive business environment, one which attracts businesses and which attracts investment, and then a livable city which attracts talented people. And remember, highly educated, talented people can often have the luxury of choosing where they live. And they will move for the things that matter to them. If it's being by the sea, if it's being somewhere free and liberal, if it's being somewhere that is a great transport hub, which allows them to get to other places that they're interested in going to. There's lots of things that might attract people, and all of those might be important aspects of livability. So business environment and livability, two hugely important indicators that would, in themselves, if can be improved for your city, would tend to lead quite quickly to economic success.
Thank you very much, Robert. And how can leaders can design and leverage in the city collective intelligence in order to anticipate future changes and create a strategy to adapt to these future changes? I don't know if Thomas or Jack would like to take that.
I'm happy to start. Thank you. So what we're seeing in Paris, for example, are cities increasingly able to draw on the knowledge of citizens and open up government in order to consider complex topics and identify ways forward. And additionally, there are a range of tools such as Polis, which has been used in Taiwan, which enable city leaders to gather, not only gather a wide range of views and knowledge from a wide range of stakeholders, but find ways to identify areas of convergence in ideas and areas of dissonance. And this can help to identify not only common ways that citizens might want to move, but also areas where there may be disagreements when selecting kind of pathways for future change. There are kind of less technological ways that you can bring citizens together as well, through small workshops that draw on the knowledge of civil society organizations, academics, and people working in the public sector, and of course surveys. But in a lot of ways, people are willing to give up their time, willing to share their ideas, but it's really down to city leaders to facilitate that gathering.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been involved in some projects, and it's very interesting to see how things are done. Dr. Thomas, do you want to? Yeah.
Just two additions. I think on the economic conditions question, I think in addition to the individual level decision of where you live and work, of course, when you look at this, the stability of the legal system and the rule of law obviously play a role. And I think this is something obviously we try to keep in mind, and to see also that dimension as this is important. And I think also what will become more important maybe with some generations coming is what is actually the economic narrative behind a specific setup you have in a region, nation. What is it we're thriving for? And I think there is this foresight work can be challenging some of the narratives we have and can bring in new elements of narratives, very much in this well-being discussion. And we looked at also trying to quantify in our report a little bit, what would it mean if, for example, health would be complemented with GDP data, and how would that sort of change potential well, the attractiveness, let's say, of some places. But of course, at the end, the economic fundamentals need to be right. Very much agree with Robert there. And then on the engagement, I think foresight can do a lot of this indeed, because foresight enables a conversation which can bring in very different voices, which don't necessarily need to agree on something, but it allows and has the methods and practices to collect these voices, make sense of them, and bring them to the table. And that can inform decisions and make them better by understanding where different people see the future developments and how they perceive future developments. And I think this is very strong. Some stuff we do, for example, we have a scenario exploration system, which is a game, a board game, literally, where you put people together and they play through a scenario, so also to assume a different role and put their shoes, foot in the shoes of somebody else. And also we have here in the team behavioral insights and design for policy. So we also look at design methods, so visualization, iteration, prototyping, to allow for this kind of not getting too quickly stuck in one way of looking at it, but to keep the discussion open for a certain time. And the BI colleagues, of course, bringing in the more behavioral dimension. What is it? What is shaping behavior also at a societal level when it comes to sustainability issues, for example?
Thank you very much. Very interesting. And I'm going to start to take some questions from the chat. So, in navigating the future, how important is collaboration with various stakeholders, including communities, businesses, and government agencies? And how can strategic foresight facilitate effective collaboration? That connects very well with what we just discussed. Would you like to take that one?
I would repeat what I just said. Basically, I think it's a good question, very good question. I think that's exactly the sweet spot, to bring these different elements together and then to inform the policymaker. And it doesn't really matter if we talk about EU level, supranational, national level, or city level, to inform the policymaker with this very rich source of information. Because the idea of foresight in applying this, and Jack has certainly more and better examples, is to learn about the perception of the future of these different groups, and they have different interests of what they want to see in the future. And I think the role of a policymaker who tries to get the best out for whatever entity he or she is responsible for is to bring these views together and to shape a policy that is future-proof with all the different variants of the future the different stakeholders see. So yeah, maybe Jack may possibly have some more on this one. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great question. So I think in terms of bringing together these kind of wide range of stakeholders, there are two real strengths to that. Firstly, it builds legitimacy for visions of the future. By bringing together people from across society and getting them to speak to one another and set out a vision together, there can be kind of the development of a kind of consensus about what the future should look like before beginning to discuss ways to reach it. And that's very important for just transitions, as Thomas has said. The second thing is this collective intelligence value. So by bringing together diverse stakeholders with diverse ways at looking at the world, you're less likely to have groupthink and a sort of lock-in. Often we talk about technological determinism. We have a very strong global tech sector that often likes to try and define what the world will look like in the future. By bringing in a wider range of stakeholders who perhaps aren't so invested in tech, you can really understand actually, what are the impacts of shifts that we're seeing? What are the kinds of shifts that we might want to see to address the more negative impacts that those might create? And bringing together that diversity reduces the sort of likelihood that everyone will make the same mistakes and everyone will look at the future in the same way. And I just want to draw on an example that we have from our Latvia work, where we constructed or tried to develop a sort of governance structure to create ecosystems that can anticipate change and act on it by engaging diverse stakeholders, identifying shared goals, ensuring that there's a willingness and a capability to collaborate, and a capacity to learn and adapt and support government to learn and adapt. And we had some success in developing these in Latvia.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Jack. I have a very good one here. How can we effectively address the dilemma of prioritizing immediate benefits over long-term sustainability in the realm of strategic foresight and for enduring success?
Okay, I mean, I think that's a really important question because
Yeah.
a lot of the political cycles are short-term, and of course, a lot of politicians work on very short-term goals because it suits their purpose. And of course, sometimes we fall for that as well. We will take election bribes in the form of tax cuts, or we will take election bribes and we will vote according to what is best for us in the short term. But actually, for the sake of humanity, we need a much longer term view. And I think we see that now. I think there's much greater appreciation of what we are leaving for our children, our grandchildren in terms of legacy. I think we see it in business as well. And it's been a long process to get business to understand the difference between asset whole life costs versus upfront costs. And it's quite a similar way of looking at the world. If you buy cheap, very often the longer term whole life costs of what you buy can be punitive. Actually, if you're smart with your procurement and you're thinking about the whole life costs, the sustainability of what you buy and how you invest, then you're going to get much better longer term results. And I think we can apply the same thinking as well to government policy and city level decision making. This is actually a function of government effectiveness. Actually, how effective are our governments at looking beyond their own short-term motives? And one of the nice things I think we see in my part of the world, in the Middle East, is that all the countries here publish vision plans. If you look in Saudi Arabia, you'll see Vision 2030. If you look in Kuwait, you'll see a Vision 2035. And these essentially commit the government to longer term goals and priorities against which they can be held accountable. And I think this is a really useful way of signaling your intention and your ambition and moving away from short-termism, which might prove beneficial for a few years, but ultimately which might hobble you with problems for decades to come.
Thank you very much, Robert. I have a very good one here with regards to the fifth industrial revolution. Well, in your opinion, what are the upcoming challenges of the fifth industrial revolution while we have not completed the fourth industrial revolution? Let's keep top three if you to keep it simple. Would you like to take that one? Dr. Thomas?
Yeah, I think I'm not an expert in the industrial
fifth revolution.
Neither 4 or 5, I fear, but from what I know, I mean, we have work streams on this in our research program as well here, and I would say, I mean, the technological push will continue, and we had this, we are still sort of absorbing this in what I consider to be Industry Revolution 4. I think what is the game changer will be partly what we discussed is how business are able to get the right skills and the right ways of collaborating and making making more sustainable business cycles. I mean, how do we produce? How do we how are value chains organized? What about if we start reshoring in the light of geopolitical consequences? Reshoring does have also environmental impacts and maybe cost impacts. So how do these new elements shape this new way of industry? And I think there is a lot of material out there on these questions. I just mentioned, I mean, our Strategic Foresight Report 23, and we dive into this a little bit because we ask the question about to what extent can we keep the amount of material consumption we're currently seeing in the light of the depletion of natural resources. So there are very difficult questions also from I mean, I'm an economist by training, so these are questions normally for an economist you would say, okay, well, there is our prices, and you know, the market will bring things to the best allocation where it is most needed. But I think there is some stuff happening outside these models which need to be addressed at a societal level. And so this would be my non-informed answer, really. But I leave it. Maybe Robert and Jack have probably some more on this one.
So I think it's interesting. So the work that I was doing prior to joining the OECD was very focused on how do you support workers and industries to transition in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, which is about automation, about robotics, about artificial intelligence. And the fifth industrial revolution is fairly new to me. And as I understand it, it's about ensuring that there is a green transition and a focus on sustainability through that. I think the fifth industrial revolution, the existence of it and the reason it needs a new name is a good indicator of the limitations of a narrow technocratic viewpoint that doesn't draw on kind of a wide range of voices to kind of anticipate the impacts of these changes. The fourth industrial revolution was developed as an idea, I think, within the World Economic Forum. And I think those of us who have been working on it have always been thinking about how do we make sure that this is sustainable. And it's partly about kind of social sustainability, ensuring that social structures aren't brought down by shifts to new ways of working as a result of these technologies. But it's interesting to me that this idea of kind of ecological sustainability and environmental sustainability has kind of only been plugged in recently, when people have realized, hang on, what do these changes not only mean for business, but mean for the world? So I think we're well placed in a way through discussions on the fourth industrial revolution to try and address those of the fifth. But I think the existence of both indicates why it's important to bring a wide range of voices into the conversations about change.
Thank you very much for your input, Jack. I have a very good one here as well. What long-term goals and strategies exist for transforming countries that are currently distant from the sustainability and density populated, such as India, Africa, and Egypt, into nations that prioritize green sustainability? Are there comprehensive plans in place to guide their transition towards sustainable development? I can read it again. The question is about how is there any plans for these overpopulated countries? What would be a good strategy, or is there any plan in place for these overpopulated countries to go towards this sustainable direction, like India, Africa, and Egypt?
So I would love to be able to answer that question on behalf of the OECD, and I have friends who are working with India at the IEA, the International Energy Agency. But I'm afraid I don't have the right information to respond to that, so I will keep stum.
Robert?
Yeah, similarly, a big question requiring some big thinking and big solutions. I think, look, these are countries, and I talked about the challenge actually of sprawling, high density cities. I think I mentioned places like Dhaka. In comparison, it's much more difficult for them than for some of those places which have much smaller geographies, much more condensed, and of course, which are newer in terms of their infrastructure. Clearly, the governments in these places need to do all they can to support innovation, to support education, digital transformation, and sustainability agendas. By doing so, they give their citizens every chance to move themselves up the income stream. I mean, I talked earlier about how GDP isn't everything, but it's significantly important to lift people out of poverty and to provide them with life chances and additional mobility. So I think it's about supporting innovation, providing education. Clearly, healthcare and education massively important in the developing economies to massively improve the lives of the citizens of some of these densely populated, relatively poor cities.
Great, thank you very much. I see that time is flying. So let's move to the final thought. So if I don't know, Jack, if you'd like to give the final 1 minute closing thought for everyone, please.
Great. Well, thank you. It's been really interesting to hear from Robert and Thomas about the work that you're doing. And I think what we've discussed here is really how cities are in a great position to draw on their innovative capabilities and their kind of nimble and agile populations to try and sketch out what the future might look like, create a vision for what they want the future to look like, and work together in order to create a future that they want to live in. Do I hand it over now to one of the other speakers?
Thank you, Robert. Like to give yours, please.
Yeah, look, I echo much of what Jack has said, and also very appreciative of Dr. Thomas's contributions as well. I think, you know, the points around strong communication and consultation are really important. What citizens and what businesses do not like are nasty surprises. They need good consultation, and they need to be asked what are their priorities, and for those to be taken into account by policymakers. At the same time, of course, you know, good governance means making decisions and not being paralyzed by thousands of different voices. There's this fabulous term that we hear sometimes called NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard. And of course, every major policy decision is going to meet some level of resistance. And of course, you know, policymakers have to filter out objections which are true and valid, and objections which are very much self-absorbed. So that's a difficult place for policymakers to be. They've got a wide range of different voices coming in, and it's why they need good structure to their consultation processes, good two-way communication, and I think, you know, using those alongside foresight, and of course I would say forecasting as well, since that's our business, that's going to help them to make high quality decisions and improve governmental effectiveness.
Thank you, Robert. Dr. Thomas.
Thanks. Yeah, 3 points maybe. On the one, these new methods of collaboration, very much in line with what Jack and both Robert also said, is for shaping policies. And I agree, you cannot have 1,000 flowers blooming. I mean, you can, but at some point you need to make a bouquet, which looks nice. And so there are these processes and these methods to do that. And I think there is an encouragement I would share with the audience to explore these. And there is a lot I think one can learn from each other by applying these. That's one, sort of the new methods of collaboration which help us collectively moving forward to a better place. The second is, what is it we want economically? What is our measure of success? And I very much liked what Robert had in terms of metrics, and also your point about the GDP importance of it as a metric, of course, in our economic systems. But how do we go beyond? And I mean, we have the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We have a lot of work. We have long-term visions in Europe with the Green Deal for 2050, where we also work with third countries. But what is this economic vision? What we would like to have? And my last point is, I think cities are great in this because they can be a laboratory. I mean, I'm leading a policy lab, so we're supposed to experiment. And I think my invitation would be for those who are in cities or other groups, experiment with these type of things and experiment and try to do this, because cities are close to citizens. They are close to business. They are in the first line. And if cities try things out, national governments will pick it up, and it will find its way also in the application of more central structures. So my call is cities be more like a laboratory and experiment with some of what you've heard today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas. It was very interesting to have these 3 points of view from business and policy side. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everyone, and have a good day and new session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all. Many thanks. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.